So the documentation is available from the OSMIS site. If you go to the OSMIS site, which I'll do here, okay, you'll find on the home page there's a link that says School Workforce Census. Grief.
It's a bit slow, but there we go.
It's my internet and the Power BI thing, right? But just here, that you can't see, there's a link that says School Workforce Census. Okay? If you click that link, you get a further link that says, do you want to create a full return or a partial return? What I'm going to be going through this morning is the full return, which is this button here. Excuse my internet, I'm uploading and downloading at the same time. But that will take you through to the documentation area, which contains all of the DFE documentation and the capita notes on how to produce the return, and also the DFE guidance on what is required from the return. Like I say, I'm going to record the webinar this morning, and as long as it makes me look good, I'll make it available on the website for those who couldn't attend this morning. Support is available throughout the process, although the enumeration date is the 7th of November. The deadline for submission up to the DFE is around about a month after that. We'll be providing support throughout that process. Please feel free, don't struggle, and don't waste any time. Just mail us support@osmis.co.uk. If this is your first time through or you're particularly nervous about it, we'd encourage you to give it a go. You're not going to break anything by starting a return and running the create and validate routines. But if you do feel like you need help, remote support sessions are available. We've scheduled some dates. If those dates aren't convenient, please do log a call and we'll try and fix something up with you directly. If you are very green to the process, if perhaps your service terms are in a bit of a mess, your personnel sections in SIMS aren't up to scratch and you're just a mile away from being able to produce the return, then we can offer on-site support through Jacqueline, Helen and a lady called Jan Barton. They will be able to come out to school and assist you. It's important to note that it's still your responsibility as a school to maintain your records. And our guys know the SIM system, but it's up to you to make sure you've got all the information around you in order to populate the SIM system as it needs to be done for census. Okay, so it's up to you to make sure that you've got details of pay grades, of any allowances that are being made, the absences, the service terms. Make sure you've got all that information to hand before our guys turn out, so that their time is used efficiently and you're not wasting resource. These visits will attract a charge, but most of you work in schools with a support entitlement, so it might well be you just call off some of the stuff you've already bought and we'll be able to support you as you need. In any event, the key is, if you're struggling, get in touch as early as possible. Okay, we've got some time after the 7th of November in order to produce the return, but let's not try and waste it. Anything to add to that, Helen and Jacqueline?
No, that's fine, I think.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine with me.
Okay. Okay, the introduction. Why are we doing this pegging thing? Right. The School Workforce Census is the DFE's main source of data on staff pay bills, how much schools are spending on staff turnover and absences. The data informs policy on pay and the monitoring of the effectiveness and diversity of the school workforce. Okay. It's also passed and shared with other government departments, local authorities, external agencies and educational researchers. The accuracy of the data that you submit to the DFE is crucial, therefore. The submission of the School Workforce Census return, including the set of the data that they're asking for, is a statutory requirement on schools, and therefore staff employed by schools don't have the option to have their data redacted, right? So this data is going up in any way, yeah? So you don't need to obtain consent from the individuals, and you have to complete the return. However, you still need to comply with GDPR in other areas, and make sure that the members of staff on which you're supplying the information to the DFE are aware that you're doing it. Right? So under something called a privacy notice, you will have provided the staff with clear and accessible privacy notices that inform the staff of what data is going to be collected, for what purposes, how it's going to get used, what's the lawful basis for processing, how long you're going to retain it after that member of staff leaves, with whom the data is shared, why the data is being shared, and if you have it stored offshore, inside or outside the EU, you need to let them know, and whether you do automated decision making or profiling using that data. Okay, so it's all standard GDPR stuff, and I am sure you're already compliant with that. the workforce census is a collection of a range of information on school workforce. Okay. The key dates, what they're looking for, is a complete set of information of all staff employed by the school since the 1st of September 2018 up till the date of the census that you're about to return on the 7th of November. Okay. So the enumeration date's the 7th of November, as I say, 2019, but it's actually going to collect information 12 months in arrears. So you've got to have all your records, all your absence records and so on, all your pay review stuff, complete and in the SIM system, ready to complete the return. Okay. Changes, if you've done this sort of thing before, there are a couple of minor changes this year. The post of support staff, so basically you can call your post in school whatever you want, so lab technician, trying to think of something else, teaching assistant, whatever you want to call them, okay? But the non-teaching staff who were termed support staff are now split between other support staff and non-teaching leadership, right? So typically, well, increasingly, we're finding that data managers and senior bursars and so on are members of the leadership team. So you've got a new category for non-teaching leadership and a new category for other support staff. What you've got to do is to recategorise any support staff posts in accordance with either of those two categories. So anybody who was support staff before now needs to be recategorised as either non-teaching leadership or other support staff. Where they are other support staff, they've dropped the requirement to provide qualification, subject and category of additional payment for those grades of staff. Okay, I will be going to that again because you'll find you'll get some errors in census if you haven't done that. And there's a new type of vacancy to be reported. So what they're asking for is the vacancies that you're holding in school on the census day. And there's a new category for apprentice teacher available from the drop down if you've got a vacancy for one of those. Okay, those are the only two changes since last year. In order to create the return in Sims, you need to be a member of the returns manager and personnel officer groups. So you won't see the school workforce census return menu route unless you're in both of those permissions groups, which means you can see all the personnel information and complete the return. You'll need to be on the Sims summer release and have at least file set version 1304 in order to begin work on the return. So that is exactly the same as it was for the pupil census, which you've just completed. So as long as you've got through that, you don't need to do anything more. Your SIM system is ready to produce the school workforce census. Complicated thing here, who to include on the return? I've got an email. Basically, it's any teachers, any support staff with contracts at any point in the last 12 months where that contract lasted for 28 days or more, whether it was 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, whether it was full-time. If the contract rolled on for 28 days or more during the last 12 months, all these details need to be included for these staff. If you've got a member of staff employed on the census day and you anticipate that that period of employment will last more than 28 days, you need to include those as well. Is that clear? I'm just going to pause there. Any questions on who to include in the return? Anything to add, Helen, while we're pausing?
No, that's fine. Just to emphasise, the service terms need to be in for 2018 and 2019.
Okay, yeah. Because, of course, we're straddling two years here.
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, guys, at any point, just type a question into the chat box if you've got anything you'd like us to go over again or clarify. And including any other teachers who have been employed on a service agreement. So this is typically a long-term supply where you're paying an agency for their services. If they're with you for 28 days or more, then they need to be included as well. So whether directly employed or employed by a third party for 28 days or more, they go on the pigging return.
Yeah. Just to mention, the DFE specification for the workforce census is quite, I think it's from page 15 onwards, which we can let discuss with schools, but it is about staff for whom the school workforce level data is required, and it's quite comprehensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you're in doubt about a particular person, then do give us a call and we'll do our best to interpret the guidance with you. Sharon's just... right. We've got a couple here. Georgina, what about apprentice teaching assistants? My view is if they're employed to be in the school, then they go on the return.
They'll be ticked as a teaching assistant on employment details, and you can tick the
eligible, yeah,
the contract.
Sharon's asking, she's a brand new school starting in September. What info is therefore required?
Just from the 1st of September.
From the 1st of September, yeah.
So the return will take care of that. Their dates of appointment will all be good. Emma has a person who's employed by the trust or another one of our trust schools, but they work at our school 2 days a week. Do they need including on the school's return?
Employed by the trust.
So I'm just looking at here. Part-time teachers, teaching assistants employed by the school. This will include staff employed by a MAT who teach in or work in schools that are part of the MAT. Is that relevant?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But what we shouldn't do though is double count them. So if they're employed principally by one of the schools in the MAT and then shared, they'll appear on one return and not the other. Yeah. So it's a case.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a case of you liaising with the other schools in the trust and making sure that they're reflected, but only once. Okay. PGCE students on placements.
No.
No, they don't.
No.
Okay. Erica's commented that she had the situation with shared staff last year and they put down the percentage of the time that were with us, which is quite right. Just make sure that all schools that use that person's time do the same. Dawn, we have a member of staff who is a casual employee on a 0 hours contract but comes in 1 day a week. Do you include him? If that situation goes on for more than 28 days, then yes. Not 28,
right.
28 individual days. Basically, if he's in for 4 weeks or more, 1 day a week, then you would include him.
It's like regular service is the tab there to look at.
It is. Okay. Right, I'm going to push on. But if you do have any queries like that, please do log them. We'll get the notes out, have a little conference, and then we'll provide the best advice we can. Okay? Right, preparing for the return, getting things ready. Okay, school level information. So this is pretty much as was submitted in the pupil census. So if it was right a few weeks ago, chances are it's right now. Just make sure that it's all there, and particularly pay attention to the contact information for the school, an email address that's checked, and a telephone number that will get answered. Alright, so just make sure the school details are correct. Now in terms of staff information, there's certain elements of the staff information that gets included for every staff included in the return. From the employee details tab, that's the first tab that you open when you open the staff record. We want the legal full name and surname, any previous names, so the name history will go up. The gender, whether or not they're eligible for SWR. If you take the tick out of there, then they're totally excluded from the return. Now that's really useful if you wanted somebody on the system that wasn't employed by the school and therefore not eligible for inclusion in the return. Right? So if you've got somebody in Sims and they shouldn't be on the return, take the tick out of the eligible for SWR box, and then the return software will completely ignore that record. If the tick's there,
if they've got duplicate records on. They've got duplicate stuff.
Yeah, that happens. Occasionally you'll find you've got the same staff recorded more than once because they changed the name and we weren't quite sure it was the same person. Just take the tick out of the box and that will ignore that record completely. It collects the date of birth, the national insurance number, their ethnicity, any qualifications they've got, and a disability indicator where their day-to-day activities in their work are substantially affected by physical or mental impairment. Okay, so it's not in too much detail. It's just asking you if they have a disability which substantially affects their delivery. Okay. In the professional details tab, we're collecting the high-level teaching assistant status and the date that was achieved, and that's required for contracted teachers, teaching assistants and other support staff who are aged 18 or over. If the member of staff is currently employed as a teacher assistant, then click the TA status box. If they're a qualified teacher, then record their status and the route to the qualification. You also need to record their qualification, including the class of degree and the first and second subject qualified, so that whatever their degree was in. Now, obviously, the range of degrees is huge, but we map them to a number of descriptions that the DFE provides. Yeah, so it's a case of you finding the best fit, and also record if you verified that qualification is accurate. Okay. Do we need to record qualifications of support staff? If they're qualified as a teacher, yes, you do. Yeah, so they're interested in qualified teacher status whether or not they're currently employed as a teacher. Otherwise,
I think it's level 4 and above, actually. Yes.
Level 4 and above, yeah. So do we need to record the qualifications of support staff? I don't think we do. I think that's been changed. If it's another support staff, then you don't. If they're non-teaching leadership, then you do. Okay. On the employment details tab, if they're primarily employed as a teacher, tick the teaching staff box. Enter a teacher number for all staff who have one, regardless of the contract they're employed under, and check the employment dates for accuracy. Just have a look in the contracts, make sure everything's okay there. Now, in terms of those contract information, we need to make sure in tool staff pay related that the salary figures for all service terms used in school are correct for this year, and indeed last year, as Helen's pointed out. So we need to make sure that the salary figures for all service terms used in schools are correct, and that's in tools staff pay related. One thing I will say, I'm not entirely sure I've got it on the PowerPoint. Every member of teaching staff is entitled to an annual salary review. You need to record the date of that review, which must be in the last 12 months to avoid an error. Okay, so I'll just draw your attention to that. Update salary, so all service terms used in school. Update any allowances paid to staff for each service term. Make sure all those tickety-boo. Award the annual increments as appropriate. Make sure all that's been done. And there it is, look. Ensure that pay reviews are accurate recorded, and ensure that salary records are accurate. That's basically it. Yeah, we need to make sure that all that is correctly recorded within SIMS, and if it is, then you'll sail through your workforce census return. Contracts, check that they're correctly recorded. If employment has changed since September last year, ensure that the start and end dates are correctly recorded. And remember that you can clone a contract if the same service term is used, just to create an extra line in there, in the history. Make sure that in focus person staff you've got all absences correctly recorded for the previous academic year up to the 7th of November. And this thing I was blathering on about at the beginning, right? When you go into your service terms in tool staff pay related, you'll find in the posts tab that your admin posts, those linked to admin service terms, will likely have the SWC post of support staff. That's no longer allowed. What we need to do is to recategorize those people as either non-teaching leadership or what's the other one? Other support staff.
Other support staff.
Yeah. So that's that one. Question from St Anthony's. If you've got an SLA with Blackburn and Darwin, do they send all contract information? All right, the latest information I've got is that they're expecting a partial return from you guys. So you need to come on the... so I've forgotten who it is from St Anthony's. But are you going to FUG on the 6th of November? If I can put it that way. Because I'll be going through all of this stuff for those who are doing a partial return. You are. Right, great. I'll be... Right, park this. Have a nice half term. See you on the 6th of November. We'll tell you what to do then. Yeah, so you don't need to worry about contracts or pay levels or absences or any of this business, because, God love them, Blackburn with Darwin are doing that for you. The rest of you, pay attention. Okay. Service agreements. Right, so the school will employ staff who are not paid directly through their payroll, through a contractual arrangement directly with the school. As we've said earlier, the school workforce census collects information for anyone providing regular service, which is part-time or full-time, service delivered over a 28-day period or more since the 1st of September 2018. Right? If they're not paid directly through your contract system, then you will need to record them as employed under a service agreement in order to include them within the return. You need to enter the member of staff into SIMS in the normal way and ensure that the eligible for SWR box is ticked. Alright? All the stuff we've gone through before, names, dates of birth, NI numbers, qualified teacher status, absences and so on, must be recorded in the same level of detail. And what you would then do is go into the Employee Details tab and navigate to the Service Agreement page and click New to add a new service agreement or highlight an existing service agreement and edit it. And what you need to do is to make sure that the following details, the data items, are entered correctly in that area. There it all is. The start date and end date of the service, the SWC post, which this is mapped to, the service type, the full-time equivalents, the weeks per year, the hours per week that they work with you, the base pay in terms of annual salary equivalent, the daily rate if this person's on a daily rate of pay, if you're paying them an additional payment, then if you've got to record that. If they've had a pay review because they've been on a service agreement for that long, then you would record that, and you record an appropriate role and start date for the member of staff. I think that, yeah, there's a screenshot of the page that you'll find in SIMS. It's an employment details, service agreement details.
I think they've got to have a pay review date regardless, so it might even be the start of service, might be the review date.
Thank you.
If it's, if it's less than 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, right, sorry Helen, that's new on me. We all learn. So you're saying that anybody on a service agreement will have a pay review date?
I think if the pay review date is blank, I think they get an error.
Right.
So it might just be, as I say, it might be the start date when the pay,
Right. Okay. So I think the pay review is it a query or an error, Helen? Forgive me to put you on the spot.
Can't remember. I'll have to have a look.
Right. We'll see it in the software in a minute because we've got a couple of errors that are related to pay review date. So. We'll see it in the software and we'll clear that one up. It does no harm to enter a pay review date. Right.
No.
Okay, so once you've got all that information up to date, your contract's up to date, your service terms, your picking pay levels, your awards, the absence information, all that personal data is all in the system, you're then in the position to start to run the return. Okay. First thing we do is to configure the return, and that's in Tools, Statutory Return Tools, School Workforce Census Settings. Right, in this area you'll configure, as you're doing a full return, you'll configure the return to produce all of the information. So it's going to look at the staff details, contract details, service agreement and so on, the lot. Everything needs ticking for those completing a full return. St Anthony's and anybody else completing a partial return, you don't need to tick all of these, but you need to tick most of them. And, well, there you go. Yeah, so you need to tick all those. You can then create a return. And that's in Routines, Statutory Return, School Workforce Census. We will be going through this in the software in a minute. We need file set 1304 or later. We are not, the DFE, as far as they've told us, are not going to release any further file sets. If you download the latest one, it's 1306, but for Workforce Census purposes, it's exactly the same. So if you're on 1304, that'll be fine. One thing I will draw your attention to, just like the pupil census, the information on Workforce Census is stored unencrypted. So anybody, if you've got it in your S drive, anybody with access to the S drive can see all the information and can see exactly how much everybody else is getting paid. So you might want to consider changing that School Workforce Census folder to a more secure and more controlled location. Okay. You are provided with the option of putting a message on any reports that are produced. So this report contains sensitive information, or this report will self-destruct in 30 seconds, or whatever is appropriate that you want to see at the top of each page of any report that you produce. The census level items, just like the pupil census, we work through them. The first one is for secondary schools only. When you open the return for the first time, as we'll see in a minute, you click the Calculate All Details button. This will draw information from SIMS, including for secondary schools, the curriculum allocations of all the members of teaching staff in the school. So what you'll end up with is a panel that lists every teacher and the subjects that they teach and the number of hours that they deliver that in the curriculum. So Mrs. Smith does 5 hours of maths, 6 hours of geography and 4 hours of PE, whatever is appropriate. Yeah. If it's not right, don't worry too much because you can manually edit it. But if it's not right, then there's something wrong with the timetable. Okay. Vacancies on census day is a panel that you need to fill in. And what they're looking for is any teaching vacancies you've got in school, from classroom teachers right up to the head. You need to record whether you've tried to fill the post and you've failed, and you also need to record whether or not you temporarily filled it, whether or not it's full-time or part-time, and also whether or not you've advertised that post and you're just waiting for applications to come in. Occasional teachers on census day relates to the supply staff. So those not employed on 28-day contracts or 28 days or more. It's the number of occasional teachers employed on the census day with qualified teacher status, without qualified teacher status, and those where you don't know whether they're qualified or not. So that's occasional teachers on census day. And then you need to record any agency or third-party support staff. So it's the number of occasional support staff who are not directly employed by the school or the local authority. The local authorities will fill in their own return on census day. And examples of these might include contract cleaners, nurses employed by a primary care trust, or outsourced IT technicians. Once again, if you've got any queries about who to include and who not to, this is the most complicated part of the pigging return, to be honest. Do feel free to log a call. We're dealing with this all the time, and as long as we can bring it to mind, we've usually encountered the question before, and we'll be able to provide the advice that you need. That's right, isn't it, Helen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Right, so you've checked all your data, you've calculated your details. It's then, just like the pupil census, time to create and validate. And the file set is there to check one bit of information against another. Okay, so it'll check to make sure that you've entered all the information that you need to. For example, on this screenshot, I've got some ethnicity missing, I've got a qualification code missing, I've not recorded any absences. Now, it might well be that I've got the healthiest workforce in Christendom, but maybe I just have forgotten to put absence record in. Deanne's asking, do we include kitchen staff employed by Lancashire County Council? I'd say not.
I'd say no as well. I think it's because they're not on your payroll.
Yeah. But you wouldn't include them as occasional staff either. I think kitchen staff are actually excluded from the return. Unless they're directly employed, he said bravely. I'm not the expert.
I'll need to check on that, because I think you put them in that they're in the building as such, rather than.
Yeah.
We'll have to come back. Diane. I'll pick that up for you.
Yeah. Okay, Deanne. Thank you. We will keep a track of all these questions and we'll reply directly, he said. Okay. So you'll get the same sort of errors and queries. Red Fs we need to deal with. They're definitely something that's wrong or missing. The queries just ask you to check the information that you are supplying. Once you've dealt with all those, you can run off some summary and detailed reports, as with the pupil census, and showing school as appropriate to make sure that whoever's responsible for signing off the return, maybe the HR, maybe the MAT, is confident and happy with the data that you're about to submit. Once you are, you can then authorise the return. Right? There's an authorise button up at the top of the screen. You authorise the return, certify that the head teacher is happy to submit this information on behalf of the school. You can add additional text, and then it's ready for upload and submission to either the local authority or to the DFE direct by collect. You would for academies, if you've got a range of options. If you're uploading direct to collect. If it is, you can get a partial return, a compliant file, a file in the right format from your payroll provider. You can upload a partial return and then merge the two halves in collect. So you've got bits of information that only the school knows, bits of information you've got in the HR system, you can merge them. Alright? If you're uploading a full return, so Blackburn and Darwin use Perspective Lite. Any Trafford schools who may be on the call, will use the Fronter system to upload the file direct to the local authority. But if you're uploading directly to collect and it's a full return, then that's all you need to do. Upload the return, leave it there for a couple of days, then go back and see if they found anything further wrong with it or they've got any further queries on it. Whew, grief. Right. Anything to add, Helen and Jacqueline, before I launch into Sims?
No, I think that's quite comprehensive.
Cool. We did it. Any questions from the floor? Anybody out there? Okay. Right. So, as I say, there's a bunch of stuff in the screenshots. Helen's written some great potted notes. Let's see if my internet's sped up this morning. Right, Piggin hasn't. I'm just going to go back in here for a second. So we need to make sure that our staff records are up to date. Do as much. Right. Where do you put the head teacher post missing?
It's on the contract. They've got to have a head teacher post in the service term, and the contract has got to include the role of head teacher.
Does that answer the question? Forgive me.
But if St Anthony's are only doing a partial return, they can ignore that because it'll be...
Yeah, that'll be submitted by the local authority.
Yeah, St Anthony's can ignore that error or query because they're only doing a partial return, and the LA will deal with the contract for the head teacher. For anybody who's doing a full return, got two questions now. For anybody doing a full return, we've got to have a post in the service term of head teacher, and the contract for the relevant person has got to include the role of head teacher.
Good, thank you.
Is that okay, Georgina? Right. Pay scales for support staff changed midway through. How's this recorded? Was this the NJ stuff?
Yes, it's the new band.
Yeah, the new bands. Do you want to take that, Jacqueline?
I'll pick up on that. Basically, we need to add some new bands into the existing service term because it's an assimilation rather than a new contract. So I can pick that up for you, Emma, if you like. We need to just then migrate the people across in their contracts onto the new bands starting from the 1st of April 19 or September 19 if you're an academy. I'll put it on the desk for you, Emma, and I'll come back to you on that.
Okay.
Sharon, well, it depends. Are you doing is Sharon an academy or a secondary school or what? Do we know, Dave?
Soon tell you. Sharon is Eden Girls Birmingham, and you're doing a full return.
Right.
Okay, sorry for the confusion. Right, so you'll be doing a full return. All the data items will have to be there, but obviously they'll only start from the 1st of September if that's when people are employed from. Well, the incorporation of the academy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we check to make sure all our staffing information is correct. The personal details, professional details, and employment details, which is where you find all the contract stuff. Okay. If I just have a quick look at... In fact, no. What I'll do is... I had a script. I'll try and stick to it. What I'm going to do now is to try and produce a brand new return. So I've checked as far as I can the details. There are a range of reports that I can run. There's a data checking report available from our website, which you can download, import, and run.
Dave?
Yes?
Before you do that, can you just go to pay related and show the change to the post?
Yeah, I did.
Pay related. No, pay related, not set up.
Sorry, boss. Right, so we're talking.
Right, we'll go. Yeah, and any service term that's being used for support staff or non-teaching staff. So we've got NJ there, but we've also got manual staff, so it would have to be done in both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
So all these posts at the moment will produce fails in the census return because it's using the old SWC post of support staff. What I need to do for each of these is open that up and then decide whether they are other support staff or leadership non-teacher.
Yes.
So our admin clerk here is going to be other support staff. Click OK, save, and that's then sorted. So anybody employed on that service term in that post.
Work down that list then.
Well, I was going to show the errors. Right, our finance officers.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, leave some alone then.
Right,
Yeah.
the lab assistant is other support staff. So what I've got to do is go through each of these. Anything that's in the SWC post of support staff, so our manual staff as well, perhaps in the posts panel. Yeah, I need to go through these and change them from support staff, which is no longer acceptable, to either leadership or other.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, and that will change the contracts automatically, so you don't have to mess with individual contracts.
Indeed, it's purely the workforce census mapping.
Just the service term. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So now I'm going to produce a return. Hooray! Get excited, guys. This is the highlight, right? To produce the return, I go routines, statutory returns, and school workforce census. As I say, if you can't see that menu route, you need to be in the returns manager and personnel officer groups. Okay, I'm going to create a new return, but first of all, I'm going to check that location, right? If all staff have access to a mapped S drive and you don't want to share everybody's pay related and absence information, then you might want to change that to a location which is a little more secure, a little more controlled. I can change the message that will appear on top of the report. Top of the report, please burn. Or dispose of, in accordance with whatever policy we've got. I create a new return by simply clicking the new button at the top there. And it will now give me the page where I have to enter all the school level information. First time through, like the pupil census return, I click calculate all details. I'm dealing with a secondary school here, so it will gather together the curriculum information for teachers and teaching assistants. Talk amongst yourselves. Done. Okay. So school information. Once again, just make sure that the school address and the establishment numbers and whatever URNs are all okay. Then in pay details, what it will do is bring forward the calculation of all the pay for the individual members of staff for you to check and make sure that's okay. If it's not, then you really should correct it within the service terms. You do have the option there, just type in something else in, right? But ideally what you want to do is to change that within the appropriate area of SIMS. Okay. And we've got two panels, one for non-leadership and one for leadership. Okay, curriculum for teaching and teaching assistants. As I say, this is calculated from the timetable in a secondary school. Primary schools don't get this, but it'll list the member of staff and then there'll be a separate line for each subject that they teach. If I want to change it because it's not been recorded correctly in Nova, then I can do. If this person's doing 10 hours of vocational subjects to year 11, then I can record that. But by and large, that information in that panel should be correct. But check it by all means. Okay. Next item is vacancies on census day. So if I'm holding any vacancies, perhaps for a deputy head, I need to record that in this panel. Click the new button to the right to generate a new row. Pardon me, select the post name. If it's associated with a subject, you need to record that there. If it's full-time or part-time, you can record that there. So I think our deputy will be full-time. Whether or not we've temporarily filled that post, and whether or not we've advertised and are currently going through the process of finding a replacement. So what you need to do is to build up a list of any vacancies that the school holds on the census day. Right? It's a good tip, save as you go along. Right? So regularly click the save button. you can then return to the panels as appropriate. Next one's talking about occasional teachers on census day. So these are your supply staff. How many you've got in the building with qualified teacher status, without qualified teacher status, or where you don't know the teacher status of that individual. And then finally, agency third-party support staff. I suspect...
Jake,
yes.
Step in there a second. This is what we call school level data, and it's saying, because there's a question before, it's supply teachers who are have a contract or under a service agreement with who are working less than 28 days, and during school census day, and support staff who are not employed directly by the school or the local authority. Third-party staff, for example, teaching assistants, contract cleaners, nurses, employed but not directly by the school.
Okay.
But that they're in on census day.
That's fine.
So it's just like a head count, really.
It is a head count, yes. There's two boxes I think you referred to there, Jax. First of all, occasional teachers is basically your supply. And then your agency of third-party support staff is where you pay somebody to put somebody in school who wouldn't be there for a period of 28 days or more. Yeah?
That's right.
Yeah. So we simply record those. So let's say we've got a... I think kitchen staff are directly excluded. We'll need to verify that.
Yeah, but it is anybody who's like teaching assistants, contract cleaners,
cool.
Not employed by the outsourced IT technicians.
Yeah. So let's say we've got 2 cleaners in on census day. We pay schools are clean for that. We pay I don't know, some agency or other to provide a bursary service, and we've got 1 external bursar in the school on the day. Click save, and that's completed that page. We've been a bit woolly there. Is it clear? Is it as clear as it needs to be for all of you?
Say that again, Dave.
I'm just asking the clients, the customers, the real people. Yeah, Deanne says yes. Well, we've got away with it, Jacqueline. Yeah. So we've got occasional teachers on census day, and then agency third-party support staff. If you've got a particular circumstance, you're not sure whether or not to include somebody, please do give us a call, and we will make sure that we consider exactly what's going on, and we'll provide the correct advice direct to you, and we'll refer to the bit of the DFE guidance, which goes on for ages, to verify that we've done it correctly. Okay. Right. So we've created our return. Everything's happy. What I'm going to do now is say I've finished. And just check my work. Right, so I click the create and validate button.
You've got a duplicate return there, Dave.
Thanks, Mrs. Right, so if I go to the browse area, hang on a sec.
Just put version 2 at the end of your description. That's it.
So it wasn't saving at any point that I was going through it. Okay. So this is the one I'm working on, and what I want to do now is create and validate this return.
Yeah.
Okay, so it collects all the data together again afresh, builds the unauthorized return file, and then runs a series of checks on the data it contains. Validation rules being applied, and you'll see that I've not done very well on my return. Okay? No. Right, now hopefully you won't end up with a big list like this. If you've done the work that we've described before you get to this point, then this will be a short list. Right? If you haven't, then this will at least point you towards what you need to look at. Alright, so we've got an ethnicity missing or invalid. This is a failure, indicating that we've got to get this sorted. So if I click Adrian Blacker here in the list, that will take me straight through to the relevant panel of Adrian Blacker's record. Okay, so ethnicity is in this box here. What was I missing? I've forgotten. Missing or invalid?
Yeah,
it's invalid. It's a wrong code.
That one. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
So white
code.
is not a code that they accept. I need to change it to white British or white appropriate. And then I can close that down and go back to my list, and he's still pigging there. He'll remain there until I create and validate again, just like the pupil census. This list that doesn't update as you correct the things. You need to rerun create and validate in order to get those errors to disappear. Okay, I've also got a range of errors to do with missing pay reviews. Yeah. I've got a qualification codes invalid there. There's a stack of qualification codes that are associated with the various qualifications. What I need to do here is open up this record and
I think it'll be the second one, won't it?
no, it's not the title, it's a drop down. Right, there you go. I need to crumbs. Hang on, I've got into the wrong qualification.
Look at
Yeah. I think that one's all right. It's that one that needs looking at.
There you go. See, that's in red, indicating
Yeah.
that's not a code they accept. It would have failed last year if this was in there. I just need to say it's an NQF, not an NVQ anymore. Click OK, click Save, and that's the error addressed. Okay, scrolling down, you'll see the sort of things you get. In this case, I've got an awful lot of 4228 and 4410 errors, right? And it talks about qualified status is missing for a teacher, but this person isn't a teacher. This error is actually generated because I haven't yet recategorized the post as being other support staff. Remember that stuff we did in tools, staff, pay related? In the service term for support staff, that person would have been employed on one of these posts, right? So it might have been the librarian, it'll be one of them. What I need to do is to make sure that I've gone through this list and recategorized all these posts as either, these are service terms, as either other support staff or non-teaching leadership. Okay? So all these posts, even though they're a bit confusing, all these errors, 4228, 4410, and I think there's a query down below as well, that will all disappear once I've finished recategorizing my support staff posts. Is that right? Somebody else tell me, was that clear?
Yeah. I think if you use that box there to list your errors in order.
Yeah.
Dave, can you see my mouse? That validation search there. If you click on that down arrow there. Yeah. So you could just list all your 4410s, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can see all those. Now, just sorting out the service term will get rid of all those, as Dave says.
Yeah. And it will get rid of those as well.
Your 4228s as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So does that make sense? So it's a case of working through all these errors. I've got people who have been employed in the school for more than 40 years, right? And that's a query, right?
That's like me.
I didn't want to say, right? But basically, I'm sorry, guys. Right, professional ed. Right. God, I'm biting my tongue. Right. You'll get a series of failures, red ones which must be addressed, and black ones, queries, which might be correct but needs your attention. Just check it out. Right? Has Mark Lubbock really been working in the school since 1967? Right? So you go into the person's record.
Especially when his date of birth is 1960.
Well, yeah, he started with us on teacher training when he was 12. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit rubbish data. Hopefully you won't encounter that sort of error, particularly if you're in new school. But it's just basically work your way through these things, get to the point where you either understand and check the queries, you've dealt with all the failures, and at that point you can produce perhaps some reports. So we can run off basic reports on professional details or the salary details and so on. Yeah, we can run these off, check them, make sure they're all accurate and correct. Once we've run through the detailed reports, then we can have a look at producing a summary report to trouble ahead with. The summary report will summarise all the information we're about to submit as part of the workforce census return. And once that's been signed off, we can then go ahead and authorise the return. It informs you can't edit the return once you've authorised it. That's entirely true, although you can clone it. So you don't have to do all the return again. But once it's locked, once it's edited, once it's authorised, Once it's authorised, it's then locked down. You cannot make any further changes. You confirm that the head teacher is happy to sign off on it, and you put an appropriate message in this box here. So, right, query 1, 2, 3, 4 is correct. Right, have checked, something like that. Yeah, checked, that'll do. Right, click continue, and that will then authorise the return and at the same time generate a copy of each of the reports. Right, in the same folder that you're saving the return in to, it will save a copy of every one of the reports as at the time when you authorised the return. Okay, and what I'm going to do is close all these reports down. You have the option to print those off, but if I now go back into this location, this is where my return will be, and it will have the name, including my DFE number, SWF for School Workforce Census Return, and it's the second such file I've created, and it's got the creation dates on there. If I go into that folder using my Windows Explorer tools, SSIMS, God, I've forgotten where it is already. Thank you, ASCO, yeah?
Yeah.
ASCO, and there's all the files, loads of them. If I sort by date modified, you'll see it. I've got, that's the file that we need to upload either to local authority or to the collect system. And here I've got a copy of every one of the detailed and summary reports that were produced at the same time as authorising the return. So if I'm interested to see that one again, just double click it, it will open up in a browser from where I can print it and do what I will with it. Okay. So, that's about all I've got to say. Anything to add, colleagues? That's you and Helen Jacks.
No, well, obviously we will need to assist some schools with the assimilation to those bands. So, but I've helped a few schools with that, and I will contact Emma, like I said.
That's great. So yeah, the key is don't struggle. So we've got a number of us on the team working pretty much on nothing but school workforce census return in the coming weeks. If you do need any help, just give us a shout. Right, we're more than happy. But what we need to do is to make sure that you guys are confident. Yeah. So what we don't want to do, ideally, is do it all for you. Deanne's asking for the assimilation bands too. Yeah. So we'll log that for you, Deanne.
Deanne, I'll pick for you because I've got you on my list about that kitchen stuff. So I'll come back to Deanne and Emma if that's okay, Dave.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's brilliant. Okay. So it only remains for me to ask if anybody's got any final questions.
The only thing I'd say, Dave, is to do a dry run as soon as possible, and let's tackle whatever questions people have got well before the 7th of November.
That's key. Yeah, don't leave it until if you've got a bit of time. If you're in over the half-term break, ideal. Please do get in touch with us with any problems that you may anticipate.
Yeah, sooner the better.
We are here to help. And we appreciate that some of you are quite new to this process. We don't want you worrying about it. We just want it to be a success, don't we? We want to get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right. So, if there are no further questions, it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Jacqueline and Helen for joining me today. Right, I can hear you all clapping out there, cheering.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time this morning. Jax?
Yes, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Right. Yeah. Good. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for your time this morning. See you on the next call. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. We're gone.